Chapter 1437. At that moment, the two of them were discussing something. The middle-aged man's voice was a little weak, and it sounded as if he was out of breath. It seemed that he had been injured recently and had not fully recovered. The purple-robed elder was full of energy. However, in order to match the middle-aged man's voice, he deliberately lowered his voice and reported something respectfully. "What is Lucien Prefecture doing?" The middle-aged man's voice carried a trace of anger, and his eyes were hazy. It was obvious that he was a little angry. Wei Shizhong disappeared without a word, and his subordinates even had to report it to the higher-ups. "What is going on?" "Young master, I also feel that this matter is a little strange." The purple-robed elder frowned and said in a low voice, "The horse bandits that were lying in ambush in Moyao Town also encountered a powerful immortal cultivator. You know about this, right?" "Yes, I let Jin Yuanfeng fight with her directly, but in the end, he was no match for that little girl. If you had not arranged for someone to lie in ambush, I reckon that Jin Yuanfeng would have been killed." The young master sighed heavily, as if he was very disappointed with Jin Yuanfeng. "Yes, after that, our people caught her. However, this little girl was very uncooperative with our questioning. My subordinates continuously interrogated her for a few days, but they did not manage to get anything out of her." The purple-robed elder's expression was a little dejected. Because Qing Menjing's strength was relatively high, after she was captured, the purple-clothed old man did not dare to interrogate her. He did not even dare to let her break her skin. He was afraid that this little girl had the backing of a large family or sect that he did not know. They could only treat Qing Menjing like a guest. They served her with good food and drinks, and provided her with a comfortable room. Then, they would suddenly ask a few questions. However, it was a pity that Qing Menjing was smarter than them. So far, they had not been able to get any definite and effective clues out of her. "Oh. Elder Shen, you said that the little girl's name is Qing Yaoyao? Are you sure that this is her real name?" The young master muttered to himself for a while, then knocked on the table and asked. "This? I'm actually not too sure." Elder Shen shook his head helplessly and said honestly, "But even if she's not telling the truth, my subordinates won't be able to get the information out of her. After all, we can't torture her. You also know, there are many strange people and hidden experts in the immortal cultivation world. If she's the disciple or last disciple of some old monster, then it'll be troublesome." The young master nodded, expressing his understanding of Elder Shen's dilemma. After thinking for a moment, he asked, "Have you checked the roster in our warehouse? All the families or sects that have established diplomatic relations with us, as well as their collateral descendants, is there anyone with the surname Cheng? It doesn't matter even if it's a man. I've checked everything that you've mentioned, and I've checked 3 times. Coincidentally, there isn't a single sect or family with this surname. I've even specially asked them one by one. Not to mention the collateral descendants, even the servants that they've invited don't have the surname Cheng." Elder Shen shook his head again, looking very discouraged. It sounded easy, but in order to confirm Qing Menjing's identity, Elder Shen had stayed up all night several times. The roster had almost been torn to shreds by him, and he had even contacted every single big family and sect. In the end, there was still no result. He was so worried that a few strands of white hair had grown out. How is this possible? The young master slammed the table and suddenly stood up. He said angrily, "Isn't this a little too strange? Where did these people come from?" Elder Shen rubbed his temples and sighed with a slight headache. This question had been lingering in his mind for a few days. These powerful people seemed to have sprung up from the ground. They had been silent all this while, but now they had appeared all of a sudden. The young master paced back and forth a few steps and murmured, "Moyao Town has always been lacking in top experts. The big family only has the Fan family that does business. I didn't expect that Jin Yuanfeng would be killed by a little girl at the nascent Soul Realm. The Lucien County is even more ridiculous. The dignified Wei Shizhong, who was at the nascent Soul Realm, was actually killed by a little kid in one move. Looks like that guy is at least at the profound ascension stage." Elder Shen pondered for a moment. He rolled his eyes and cautiously suggested, young master, recently, our forces have gradually grown stronger. We've already begun to infiltrate some of the wealthier towns in the immortal cultivation world. Basically, we have spies in every town. Do you think we should let them spread out and check to see if there are any strangers that have appeared recently? Maybe there will be some clues. All right. We'll do as you say. The young master nodded his head decisively and agreed. He then turned around and said, "Oh right, remember to tell those people in other places that if they meet an expert when robbing or blocking the road, don't fight them head on. You can test them. If you can't beat them, immediately retreat. Send the news back first and gather them here to deal with it." Yes, subordinate obeys. Eldershin stood up and cupped his fists to accept the order. He then asked, "Then how should we deal with the guy from the Burning Sky faction? Should we send an expert to kill him directly, or should we keep him for observation for a while?" "You don't have to worry about this matter. After all, that is a profound ascension stage expert. He's not someone you can kill whenever you want." The young master rejected Eldershin's suggestion and waved his hand. "You can go. Just do what I told you. If there are any new developments, report to me at any time." "All right," subordinate will take his leave. Eldershin naturally would not disobey. He respectfully bowed and left the room. Then, he carefully closed the door. After sending Eldershin away, the young master took out a sound-transmitting talisman from his pocket. He hesitated for a moment, then seemed to have made up his mind. He brought over a basin of water and carefully placed the sound-transmitting talisman on the surface of the water. He silently said a few words. Not long after, the sound-transmitting talisman emitted a faint white light. There were ripples on the surface of the water. A few bubbles slowly floated up. At the same time, a cold male voice came out. "How's your injury?" A loud but emotionless voice echoed in the large room. Although he said words of concern, it didn't sound like he cared at all. "F.A. Father, my injury is more or less fine. I'll completely recover after resting for a while. Thank you for your concern." The young master was obviously startled. He did not expect that his father would actually ask about his injury. He was somewhat surprised in his heart. He paused for a moment before replying with a stutter. Chapter 1438. "Oh, it's good that you're fine. Why are you in such a hurry to find me? Did you encounter some trouble again?" The voice did not linger on this matter and went straight to the main topic. Moreover, it sounded quite impatient. The young master was still a little emotional before, but after hearing the voice, he immediately became sober. He respectfully reported to the basin, "Yes, father, there is indeed a little trouble. There are some problems in Moyao Town and Lucien Prefecture. It's like this." Next, the young master reported the recent happenings in Moyao Town and Lucien Prefecture. He emphasized that the captured Sheng Yao Yao and the profound ascending stage expert in Lucien Prefecture suddenly appeared recently. After listening to the young master's description, the man on the other side of the basin did not immediately respond. He seemed to first ponder for a while, then slowly opened his mouth. "Don't worry about the girl with the surname Cheng for now. I'm a little interested in the Burning Sky faction kid you mentioned. Have you found out about this guy's identity and background?" "This? Not yet." The young master replied with some embarrassment, then quickly added, "But Eldershin has already contacted the big clans and sects that we have established diplomatic relations with. They all said that they did not send out this kind of expert." After finishing this sentence, the young master had been waiting for his father's reply, but there was no movement from the basin for a long time. He felt a little uneasy in his heart. After hesitating for a while, he gathered his courage and analyzed, "I feel that those sects and clans have a certain amount of power and reputation. Even if they really send out an expert of the same level, I guess they would not send him to a small place like the Burning Sky faction in Lucien Prefecture. So according to my guess, that guy is likely to be a proud disciple of some old monster who has been in seclusion for a long time." After the young master finished speaking, the man's voice quickly sounded, "If that's the case, you can send an expert at the peak of the profound ascending stage to meet the Burning Sky faction kid. It's best if you can lure his master out. This kind of old thing will sooner or later be a disaster in the immortal cultivation world. You can either keep him as a dog or directly eliminate him. The man's voice was extremely cold. When he talked about killing people, it was as easy as cutting melons and vegetables. He had no fear towards the so-called hidden expert. All right, no problem. I'll get it done right away. After receiving the instruction, the young master felt reassured and immediately nodded. He felt that his father should have finished speaking, so he reached for the basin and prepared to pour the water out. However, just as the young master's hand touched the edge of the basin, he saw a few more bubbles floating to the surface. Startled, he immediately stopped what he was doing and held his breath as he waited for his father to speak again. He wanted to see what other instructions he had for him. Wait. As the bubbles burst, the man's cold voice sounded again, I've thought about it. We can't let our people do anything about this. The young master was stunned. Just now, he said that he would send a master at the peak of the profound ascending stage, and now he didn't want him to fight? Why was that? Fortunately, the man's analysis voice quickly rang out again. Even though the Lucien prefecture is not considered a big place, there are many people here. If someone from another faction were to accidentally see this, no matter who it is, it would be troublesome. The young master came to a sudden realization and nodded in agreement. Suddenly, he remembered that his father couldn't see and quickly said, Father is still the most thorough. What should we do then? Oh. I just thought of a new plan. We need to do this and this, and this and this. The man's voice became softer and softer, and the young master had to lean very close to the basin to hear it. Any further and he would only be able to hear a whisper. The young master leaned over the basin and carefully listened to the plan. He felt that his father's way of handling things was better, so he readily agreed. After ending the call with his father, the young master took out a sound-transmitting talisman and gently placed it on the surface of the water. These past few days, the Burning Heavens faction had been very lively. All the disciples were busy transporting heavenly materials and earthly treasures back from the bandits' lair. Because there were too many things being transported back, even Gong Xiaoxi and Duan Suqing joined the team to help count. Even though they were a little tired, seeing the many treasures that had been lost and recovered, the mood of everyone in the Burning Sky faction was very good. Hong Zhu, on the other hand, had been wandering around the pile of things that had been brought back. Her eyes stared at the chests of spirit crystals, feeling as if her eyes were emitting a golden light. Sometimes, when others weren't paying attention, Hong Zhu would casually grab a handful of spirit crystals and stuff them into her underwear. Then, she would reveal a secretly delighted expression and happily hum a song by herself. Hong Zhu thought that she was doing it secretly, but everyone actually knew that she was stealing spirit crystals. It was just that Gong Xiaoxi and Duan Suqing didn't care about it at all. In their eyes, it wouldn't be a problem even if they gave all the spirit crystals to Hong Zhu, because those were things that exalted immortal Xiao had snatched back. As his Dao companion, Hong Zhu naturally had the right to do as she pleased. When the other disciples who were busy transporting saw that the sect master and the managing elder didn't say anything, they also tactfully chose to remain silent. Xiao Chen, on the other hand, didn't care about this. He just sat lazily to the side and watched everything that was going on. Ever since he had returned from the bandits' lair, Xiao Chen's heart had always had a faint premonition that something bad was about to happen. However, if he wanted to investigate carefully, he wouldn't be able to find out the specific reason. Therefore, he could only sit there with an uneasy mood and wait for something to happen. Reporting to Sect Master Duan, Managing Elder. Yun Xian Sect's Elder Nangong has brought disciples to pay a visit. They are currently waiting outside the main gate. Just as Xiao Chen was about to put away his thoughts and tease Hong Zhu, he suddenly heard the sound of dang 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 footsteps outside the door. A disciple hurriedly ran in and loudly reported while gasping for breath. Trouble's coming. Xiao Chen quivered as this sentence suddenly flashed in his mind. When the disciple reported just now, Xiao Chen's heart unconsciously thumped. Although he didn't know what the Yun Xian sect was, his intuition told him that these people might be inextricably linked to the bandits that had scattered in all directions. Yun Xian sect? What are they doing at the Burning Heavens sect? When Duan Suching heard the report, he couldn't help but be slightly stunned. He turned to look at Gong Xiaoxi and found that he also had a blank expression on his face. After thinking for a while, he instructed the disciple, invite Elder Nangong to the guest hall first. Take good care of him. The managing elder and I will arrive shortly. Do not neglect them. Chapter 1439. Looking at the back of the Burning Sky sect disciple who was running away, Xiao Chen put on an interested expression and asked, Sect Master Duan, where did that profound cloud sect come from? Could it be that the Burning Sky sect has a relationship with them? Or did you guys offend someone from the profound cloud sect before, so they came to find trouble? I don't think I've heard you guys mention this sect before. Hee, exalted immortal Xiao, you think too highly of our Burning Sky sect. Duan Suching helplessly laughed bitterly and waved his hand. The profound cloud sect ranks second in the entire cultivation world in terms of foundation and strength. How could the Burning Sky sect have such great charisma? What kind of relationship could we have with them? It's even more impossible to offend such a colossus. They only need to move their fingers and they can annihilate our entire sect. Why bother humiliating ourselves? It's only second place. What's so great about it? Then what's the number one sect in the cultivation world? When Hongzhu heard Duan Suching's description, he couldn't help but curl his lips and snort. In Hongzhu's mind, Xiao Chen was the most powerful person. The other number one and number two were all trash, not worth mentioning at all. Master's wife, let me tell you this. Gong Xiaoxi put down the pen and paper that recorded the treasures, jumped out from the pile of herbs, shook off the dried leaves on his clothes, and said with a smile, there are three great sects at the top of the cultivation world. Number one is the Huanshan Pavilion, number two is the Profound Cloud sect, and the last is the Tsanghua sect. Three great sects. Hongzhu frowned and muttered with some disdain, why do I hear these three great sects' names sound so mediocre? They're just mediocre. Could it be that there aren't any other powerful sects or clans that can compare to them? This. Gong Xiaoxi scratched his head and said with some uncertainty, I've actually heard that in recent years, there seem to be two mysterious sects that have suddenly emerged. Their strength is developing rapidly, and they're showing signs of catching up to the three great sects. Oh. So magical. Hongzhu's interest was immediately piqued. He held his chin and asked curiously, Elder sister, I feel that the two sects you mentioned are a bit interesting. Disciple, do you know their origins? Gong Xiaoxi rubbed his nose and smiled embarrassedly. Although they have been developing very quickly recently, they were only small sects in the past. No one has ever carefully investigated their origins. Moreover, I heard that the whereabouts of these two sects are very secretive and they rarely appear in the immortal cultivation world. So, I actually don't know much about them. Sorry to disappoint Master's wife. Hongzhu pursed his lips in disinterest. Just as he was about to say something, Xiao Chen waved his hand and interrupted him. All right, little Hongzhu, we don't have time to inquire about these trivial matters. Let's go and chat with the people from the Profound Cloud sect first. Let's see what their purpose for coming here is. It won't be too late to chat after we've settled this. Xiao Chen had always been brooding over the Profound Cloud sect's intentions. He had a strong feeling that this sect had come with ill intentions, so he wanted to solve this problem first. As for other matters, he could deal with them later. Xiao Chen had always been brooding over the purpose of the Profound Cloud sect's visit. He had a strong feeling that this sect probably did not come with good intentions, so he wanted to solve this problem first. As for other things, it would not be too late to deal with them later. In the main seat of the living room, sat an old man wearing a light green robe. Behind him stood 5 young men. Each of them had a dignified expression on their faces and did not conceal their cultivation. They were all experts at the peak of the nascent soul stage. This old man was the Profound Cloud sect's elder Nan Gong. He picked up the cup that was respectfully handed to him by a servant and took a sip. Soon after, he frowned and slammed the cup heavily on the table. It was obvious that he was somewhat dissatisfied with the tea. Raising his eyes, Elder Nan Gong just happened to see Xiao Chen and his party coming towards him. He didn't have any intention of standing up and continued to sit leisurely on the chair. His expression was neither cold nor warm, making it very difficult to guess what he was thinking. Ha ha ha, this must be the famous Elder Nan Gong. Nice to meet you, nice to meet you. I've heard so much about you. After walking into the hall, Duan Suqing cupped his fists and bowed according to the rules. He slightly leaned forward and said some polite words. Elder Nan Gong made a sound of oh, but still didn't stand up. His eyes were lowered as if he was studying the patterns on the ground, as if he hadn't heard Duan Suqing's greetings. Duan Suqing awkwardly coughed twice, and then respectfully said, Elder Nangong's presence this time is truly an honor for our Burning Heaven sect. I don't know what advice you have for our humble sect. Only then did Elder Nan Gong raise his eyes. His sharp eyes swept over everyone, pausing on Xiao Chen and Hong Zhu for a moment. Then, he turned his gaze to Duan Suqing and asked expressionlessly, There's no need for advice. This old man heard that a few days ago, you exterminated a group of bandits and obtained a lot of heavenly treasures from their storehouse. Is this true? I didn't think that this gossip would spread so quickly. Duan Suqing was stunned. He didn't think that Elder Nan Gong would actually ask such a question. He subconsciously pointed at Xiao Chen and said, It's all thanks to Immortal Zhao's help that our humble sect was able to successfully exterminate that group of bandits in one fell swoop. We've let Elder Nan Gong see a joke. Although he said that, Duan Suqing muttered in his heart, Isn't this old fellow's nose a little too sensitive? The Profound Cloud sect is about a few hundred kilometers away from the Burning Heavens sect. How did he know that the bandits were exterminated? And what does this have to do with the Profound Cloud sect? Although he was muttering, Duan Suqing didn't have any intention of hiding it. Since this Elder Nan Gong could mention this matter as soon as he came up, it meant that he had already done his investigation beforehand. Even if he lied and said that there was no such thing, he would still be exposed in the end. It was better to admit it frankly. Immortal. Xiao. Elder Nan Gong looked in the direction that Duan Suqing was pointing at. His expression couldn't help but become sluggish. He carefully looked at Xiao Chen and asked with some uncertainty, Are you talking about this young man? That's right. Immortal Zhao's strength is outstanding, and he has made great contributions to our Burning Heavens sect. He's a great benefactor of our sect. Duan Suqing nodded and introduced him very enthusiastically. Elder Nan Gong glanced at Xiao Chen again and said indifferently, I really couldn't tell that at such a young age, you're actually being praised as an immortal. As far as I know, that bandit leader seems to be an expert at the nascent soul stage. To be able to kill him without a scratch, it seems that you do have some ability. Chapter 1440. Oh, it's just a so-so. What's so special about a nascent soul peak? Even if it's a profound ascending stage master, I can easily kill him. Xiao Chen stretched and said casually. Young man, although it is said that a newborn calf is not afraid of a tiger, this old man advises you to restrain yourself a little. Don't go around talking big. Otherwise, it will be bad if you get slapped in the face. Elder Nan Gong sneered and mocked in a neutral tone. So what if I don't restrain myself? Are you going to bite me? At this time, Xiao Chen had a rough idea in his heart. The corner of his mouth raised. He took 2 steps forward and sat on the chair next to Elder Nan Gong. He crossed his legs and said leisurely, But I found out that your Profound Cloud sect is quite well informed. Don't tell me you want to take advantage of the situation and get a piece of the pie. Presumptuous. Those treasures were originally stolen from our Profound Cloud sect. It's natural for us to come and take them back. Before Elder Nan Gong could speak, a Profound Cloud sect disciple behind him stood up and pointed at Xiao Chen. He said angrily, And you brat, you actually dare to be so boastful. How dare you disrespect our Elder Nan Gong? Are you itching for a beating? When Duan Suqing and Gong Xiaoxi heard this, their faces changed. They looked at each other for a moment and felt a little strange. Those heavenly treasures were obviously stolen from the Burning Sky sect's garden by those bandits. Why did this profound cloud sect suddenly stick their noses in? Your profound cloud sect is hundreds of miles away. No matter how much trouble the bandits cause, they won't cause trouble there, right? What's more, the profound cloud sect has a long history and a deep foundation. There are many experts in the sect. Even if those little bandits eat bear's heart and leopard's gall, they wouldn't dare to come and steal your things. Wasn't this clearly robbing a burning house? What else could it be? Duan Suqing and Gong Shaoxi both had a look of disbelief on their faces. They didn't expect that the profound cloud sect, a famous sect in the cultivation world, could actually do such a despicable thing. They even had the cheek to act so righteously. Isn't this a little too shameless? No way, didn't your profound cloud sect claim to be the second largest sect in the cultivation world? How could he be robbed by a few bandits? It seems like you're only so-so. Xiao Qin was already mentally prepared, but he still pretended to be very surprised and sighed. Cut the crap. The disciple was a little lacking in confidence, but he still forced himself to reprimand. People make mistakes, horses stumble. Even the profound cloud sect has times of slacking. Isn't it normal for bandits to steal things? Hong Zhu, who had been silent all this while, suddenly let out a giggle. His smile was like a blooming spring flower, causing the disciple who was looking at him to be somewhat dumbfounded. The profound cloud sect is so powerful. Logically speaking, they only need to casually send a few experts out to defeat those bandits, right? Hong Zhu grinned as he looked at that person, but the words that came out of his mouth were neither cold nor warm as he ridiculed. I didn't think that such a large sect would actually have my husband stand up for you in the end. Now, not only are you not thanking me, but you also want to ask for something. Isn't this a little too shameful? Did you hear that? Xiao Qin snapped his fingers and unhurriedly said, "This great immortal's Tao companion is right. Since this great immortal was the one who stole it, it naturally belongs to me. I can give it to whoever I like. You guys are lacking in ability and had your things stolen by others, yet you still have the nerve to chase after me to ask for it back. If this matter were to spread, I reckon that your profound cloud sect would not be able to survive in the cultivation world in the future." After he finished speaking, Xiao Qin gave Hong Zhu a look of praise and secretly gave her a thumbs up. Although this little girl usually didn't know what to do, her mind was still very sharp in critical moments. It just so happened that he was able to go along with her words. Hong Zhu naturally wouldn't let go of any opportunity to tease Xiao Qin. She immediately threw him a flirtatious look with an expression that said, "It's a great fortune that you can find me. We couldn't find the bandits' lair. Otherwise, they would have been killed long ago. How could it be your turn to act?" When the disciple saw Xiao Qin and Hong Zhu blatantly flirting with each other, he felt a burst of jealousy in his heart and stuttered, "They just had a bit of dog shit luck and found the entrance somewhere. How dare they be so arrogant? This is simply outrageous. Oh, what's the point of saying all this? In the end, isn't it because you don't have the ability? Alright, don't talk nonsense." Xiao Qin waved his hand disinterestedly, then turned to look at Duan Suqing and said indifferently, "Sect leader Duan, I suggest that you send our guests away. We still have a lot of things in our courtyard to count. There's no need to waste words with them here. Let's hurry up and get down to business." "Exalted immortal Xiao, don't you think this matter?" Duan Suqing also had a difficult expression on his face at this moment. He stammered and didn't know what to say to smooth things over. On one side was the great benefactor of the Burning Sky sect, Gong Shaoxi's master and Gong Ruidong's master. On the other side was the famous Profound Cloud sect in the cultivation world. Although the reason they came to ask for heavenly treasures was somewhat far-fetched, he couldn't afford to offend a small Burning Sky sect. "I say, great sect leader Duan, has your Burning Sky sect changed its surname to Xiao?" Without waiting for Duan Suqing to finish speaking, Elder Nangong interrupted in a strange tone. "If this old man remembers correctly, besides you, the sect leader, the Burning Sky sect should also have a grand elder, right?" Duan Suqing wiped his sweat and explained with difficulty, "Elder Nangong, our Burning Sky sect does indeed have a grand elder, but he is currently injured and can't, even if he is injured, he is still the backbone of the Burning Sky sect. Since when is it your turn to be in charge? Elder Nangong sneered, glanced at Xiao Chen, and said mockingly, not to mention this so-called exalted immortal, who came out of nowhere. Gong Xiaoxi suddenly took a step forward with some dissatisfaction and said loudly, Grand Elder Gong Ruidong is my father. He and I have already formally acknowledged exalted immortal Xiao as our master, so exalted immortal Xiao has full authority to make decisions for our Burning Sky sect. Elder Nangong was finally stunned and didn't immediately fight back, because he really didn't have this information. A father and son acknowledged the same master? How should they address each other normally? No matter who is in charge, it is an internal matter of the Burning Sky sect. It has nothing to do with you. Xiao Chen snorted and looked at Elder Nangong from the corner of his eyes. He said, anyway, those natural treasures were all snatched by our Burning Sky faction. If Elder Nangong wants them back, it's not impossible. However, you have to pay 200,000 spirit crystals in advance as compensation for my labor and hard work. Chapter 1441. In fact, Xiao Chen knew very well that although the herbs planted by the Burning Sky faction were precious, they were not worth 200,000 spirit crystals at most. Therefore, he was asking for too much this time. As for why he did this, the purpose was very simple. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that the Xianyun sect must have another purpose this time. It was definitely not as simple as extorting some herbs. Therefore, Xiao Chen was too lazy to beat around the bush with the Elder Nangong. He intended to force out his real intention directly. Bullsh *T. You brat, you're simply talking nonsense. The Elder Nangong's eyes flashed with anger. He stared at Xiao Chen and said sternly, those treasures originally belonged to our Xianyun sect. Moreover, I have never asked your Burning Sky faction to help wipe out the mountain bandits. It is all your wishful thinking. Why should the Xianyun sect pay 200,000 spirit crystals? Unable to suppress the anger in his heart, the Elder Nangong simply waved his fist and directly smashed the rosewood table beside him. With a boom sound, the sawdust suddenly flew all over the sky. It could be seen that he was really angry. Xiao Chen was slightly startled. He looked at the faint aura emitted by the Elder Nangong. For a moment, he could not see through the Elder Nangong's cultivation. He was a little vigilant. He secretly ordered the fire of the underworld and a little demon to prepare in advance. The expression on his face remained as calm as ever. Duan Suqing was a little panicked at this time. He waved his hand and wanted to say something to change the situation. However, before he could speak, he was interrupted by Xiao Chen. Elder Nangong is really good. You came to other sects to tear down the table. In that case, let's talk about the 200,000 spirit crystals later. Give me 1,000 spirit crystals as compensation for this table. Humph. It's just 1,000 spirit crystals. I still have it. However, it is not used to compensate for the table. It is a gift for you to buy a coffin. Go to hell, little bastard. The Elder Nangong sneered. A towering aura suddenly burst out from his body. The pressure was like a monstrous wave that rolled and spread in the reception hall. It was the realm of the profound ascension stage. Elder Nangong had long been a little impatient. This time, they had mustered a large force to come to Burning Sky faction. What bandits? What treasures? Those were all excuses. Their true objective was to kill this exalted immortal Xiao. And this whole thing was personally planned by the young master's father. The key was to lure out the murderer and kill him to avenge Wei Shizhong. At the same time, he could take back the spiritual crystals and heaven and earth treasures that had been stolen. The surrounding air had become stagnant. That heavy and powerful pressure made everyone feel suffocated. The oppressive feeling of death made Xiao Chen's hair stand on end. He quickly retreated. It had been a long time since Xiao Chen had encountered such a powerful master. He understood in his heart that he absolutely couldn't give his opponent any chance to make a move. He had to make the first move and kill him with a single blow. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Nethery. Little demon N. Don't be merciful. Use your most powerful moves to kill that old thing." As he retreated quickly, Xiao Chen shouted in the sea of consciousness. Following Xiao Chen's command, the underworld flame and a little demon holding a flying sword appeared on both sides of him at the same time. They rushed toward the position where Elder Nan Gong was standing from two directions. The flame of the underworld, which was charging forward quickly, continuously absorbed the essence in Xiao Chen's body. It gradually turned from an inconspicuous little flame into a huge fireball. From time to time, it would even spit out a tongue of bluish-purple flame. It looked extremely dangerous, but it was also rather gorgeous. On the other hand, Xiaoma took a different path. As she rushed forward, she split into two, then into four. In the blink of an eye, there were dozens of identical figures in the living room. Each of the humanoid black gas held a flying sword in their hands. They stabbed at Elder Nangong's chest from different angles and directions without any blind spots. "Hee, you really have some skills. It seems that I have underestimated you just now." Elder Nan Gong, who saw this terrifying scene, didn't look afraid at all. Instead, the corners of his mouth curled into a strange arc. He taunted unhurriedly, "I didn't expect you to have some skills at such a young age, but that's all." As soon as he finished speaking, Elder Nan Gong's hands suddenly moved. Two diamond-shaped jade artifacts, one black and one white, appeared in his hands. In the blink of an eye, the white jade artifact in Elder Nangong's left hand had transformed into a diamond-shaped shield that glowed with white light, while a black phantom spear had appeared in his right hand. The two artifacts were shining with a strange light, and it was obvious that they were not ordinary artifacts. Xiao Chen's footsteps paused slightly. He stared at the artifacts in Elder Nan Gong's hands with a solemn face. He could feel a strong fluctuation of vitality from those two things. All the artifacts he had seen before paled in comparison to these two. After carefully evaluating the strength of the two sides, Xiao Chen had already keenly realized that even if he let Abyssal Flame and a Little Demon use their full strength, it was very likely that they wouldn't be able to hurt the other party at all. After all, both of them relied on Xiao Chen to be able to survive. In addition to their own abilities, they needed to borrow his vitality to enhance the lethality of their martial arts. The strength of the old guy in front of him was at the great perfection of the Mystic Ascension stage. He was much stronger than Xiao Chen, who was at the 7th level of the Mystic Ascension stage. Therefore, Abyssal Flame and a Little Demon would definitely be helpless against him. From the moment Elder Nan Gong revealed his artifact to the moment Xiao Chen made a judgment, it was actually only a moment. With this in mind, Xiao Chen knew that today's fight was probably a little dangerous. However, he did not hesitate at all and quickly used his movement technique. Taking advantage of the fact that Elder Nan Gong was busy dealing with the flames of the underworld and a Little Demon, Xiao Chen advanced instead of retreating. Leaving an afterimage where he was standing, he rushed behind Elder Nan Gong like a ghost. Waving his arms quickly, he slapped Elder Nan Gong's back heavily. Xiao Chen had already used all his strength in this palm. He only hoped that he could hit with one blow. Even if he couldn't kill Elder Nan Gong, he wanted to seriously injure him. Boom! The hellfire of the underworld launched a powerful attack at this moment, but it was perfectly blocked by the white diamond shield in Elder Nangong's left hand. There was only a loud explosion, but Elder Nan Gong was unscathed. Xiao Chen was originally delighted in his heart. He thought that the huge explosion would be able to cover up the wind generated from his palm strike. He didn't expect that Elder Nan Gong had already predicted that he would launch a sneak attack. He retracted the black phantom spear in his right hand, and as if he had eyes on his back, the end of the spear's handle coincidentally collided with Xiao Chen's palm, causing him to involuntarily take a step back. Chapter 1442. At the same time, Elder Nan Gong waved his arm fiercely and swept the shield in front of him, hitting most of Xiaoma's avatars that were floating in the air and smashing them one by one. In this short span of a breath, Elder Nan Gong blocked the fire of the underworld on the left, stopped Xiao Chen's sneak attack from the back, and repelled a group of Xiaoma. He actually resolved all the attacks easily. Everyone present was dumbfounded. Xiao Chen and Elder Nangong's series of attacks and defenses dazzled everyone, making it hard for their eyes to take in all of it. Some of the weaker juniors did not see the movements of the two at all. They only heard a series of banging sounds and Xiao Chen suddenly appeared behind Elder Nangong. Then, many inexplicable things appeared in the living room. At this time, Xiao Chen's right palm had been hit by the handle of Elder Nangong's spear. There was a bone-cracking pain that started from the palm that was hit and gradually spread to his entire right arm. Xiao Chen frowned and shouted while enduring the pain, "Little Nethery and Xiaoma, don't attack separately. Attack together and kill him with all your might." After hearing Xiao Chen's order, the fire of the underworld jumped a few times in the air and suddenly turned into a bluish-purple smoke, quickly entering in Xiaoma's body. After obtaining the power of the fire of the underworld, and Xiaoma's two pitch-black eye sockets quietly appeared a wisp of flame. His mouth also began to spew fire. Even the flying sword that was originally as bright as autumn water was gradually covered with a layer of bluish-purple shimmer. It looked as if it was dipped in poison, which was extremely strange. Oh. This is a little interesting. I didn't expect these two artifacts to not only have their own consciousness, but they can also merge into one. Elder Nangong looked at Xiaoma up and down with interest. He found that his figure seemed to have grown bigger and looked more powerful than before. He. Are you afraid? Why don't you kneel down and admit your mistake? Maybe I'll be merciful and leave your corpse intact. And Little Demon said with a strange smile as he felt that he was full of strength. His confidence was greatly boosted. Elder Nangong did not seem to hear Xiaoma's threat. He carefully observed the bluish-purple flame in her eye sockets. As if he suddenly thought of something, he turned to look at Xiao Chen and asked with narrowed eyes, "Boy, I heard that there is a kind of quenching fire in the world, also known as the heavenly flame. It is not afraid of any water source, and the most powerful one can even burn everything in the world. Did you get it? What's the true tempering mystical flame?" Xiao Chen moved his aching right arm and pretended to be nonchalant as he said, "I'm from the countryside. I don't understand the nonsense you're talking about. It's your magic tool, that purplish blue flame." Elder Nangong's face turned cold. He couldn't tell if this kid was pretending to be stupid or if he was really stupid. "Oh, that." Xiao Chen grinned and laughed heartlessly. "I bought a lighter and it was given to me for free. I thought the color was not bad, so I used it to bluff people. What a waste of God's gift." Elder Nangong snorted angrily and looked back at the faint blue flame. A hint of greed flashed in his eyes as he said, "Boy, give me your quenching fire, and I can consider not pursuing the matter of Burning Sky faction robbing our profound cloud sex treasure for the time being. What do you think? Are you King sick?" Xiao Chen stood behind Elder Nangong and secretly gave Xiaoma a look. He kept scolding, "You old fart, do you have no money to buy a coffin? Was he blinded by lard? Why did he want every good thing he saw? Why don't you go and collect junk?" Before he finished speaking, Xiao Chen's feet gently stepped on the ground. His figure was like a breeze as he suddenly appeared on top of Elder Nangong's head. His left palm gradually condensed a cyclone. "Old thing, how dare you ignore me? I'll make you pay the price you deserve. TSK, TSK, TSK." And Xiaoma received Xiao Chen's gaze and immediately laughed strangely. The flying sword in his hand ignited a towering flame as he slashed at Elder Nangong's left shoulder. "Humph, it's just a small trick. How dare a grain of rice shine?" Elder Nangong snorted coldly as he raised his spear and easily blocked Xiaoma's flying sword. Xiao Chen wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to strike, but Elder Nangong seemed to have eyes on top of his head. While blocking the flying sword, he waved the shield in his left hand up and directly knocked Xiao Chen away. Elder Nangong had just finished off Xiao Chen with this move and his other hand immediately turned his wrist flexibly. The long spear took advantage of the momentum to deflect the flying sword's blade. The sharp tip of the spear moved forward and stabbed Xiaoma's right leg. He. "Old man, are you a fool? How dare you stab me with an ordinary weapon? This is simply..." "What?" At first, Little Demon was smug and wanted to mock him, but when he looked down, he found that his thigh that had been stabbed was continuously leaking black gas. He was shocked. Bang! At this time, there was a loud noise. After being sent flying by Elder Nan Gong, Xiao Chen smashed heavily into the wall. Wood shavings splattered everywhere as the wall collapsed, burying Xiao Chen inside. The dust that flew up filled the living room. Husband Xiao Chen. Exalted immortal master. Hongzhu and Gong Xiaoxi, who were standing on the side, could not help but be horrified when they saw this scene. They shouted in unison and then moved, ready to run over to check on Xiao Chen's condition. However, as soon as the two of them took a step, 5 figures suddenly appeared in front of them. It was the 5 disciples of the Profound Cloud sect. They blocked in front of them. All 5 of them were exuding faint yuan qi from their bodies, fully displaying their cultivation bases of the consummate nascent soul stage. They did not attack Hongzhu and Gong Xiaoxi, instead standing in a straight line in front of them. It was obvious that they did not want to let the two of them pass so easily. Hongzhu and Gong Xiaoxi both had fuming looks on their faces, but they also knew that with their strength, they would not be able to defeat any one of them in a one-on-one fight, not to mention that there were currently 5 nascent soul stage cultivators glaring at them. They had no choice but to stand on their tiptoes and peer at the large hole, but it was completely gray and they could not see the situation clearly, so they could only stare anxiously. Seeing that his disciple had the situation under control, Elder Nangong sneered and turned his gaze back to Xiaoma. He said lightly, "Although I don't know what you are, even an immortal cultivator of a higher level than me would not be able to gain any advantage over these 2 magic tools, let alone a nondescript thing like you. You'd better surrender and hand over the heavenly fire of quenching truth." Chapter 1443. Hee, then why don't you try this move? And Xiaoma suddenly let out a sly laugh. The black gas in his body surged quickly and surged towards the part of his thigh that was stabbed. Elder Nangong's black spear was still stuck in his wound. The next moment, a blue-purple flame suddenly sprang out of Xiaoma's wound and instantly ignited the black spear. The flame spread rapidly along the handle of the spear. And Xiaoma took the opportunity to raise the flying sword in his hand and slashed at Elder Nangong's head. Elder Nangong did not expect Xiaoma to make such a move. He could not help but frown slightly. He wanted to withdraw his spear first, but he found that the spear had been locked by the black gas and could not move. At the critical moment, Elder Nangong quickly raised the white diamond-shaped shield in his other hand to block the attack of the flying sword. He chanted a spell silently and turned the phantom spear into a black jade artifact. Only then did the flame on the spear completely extinguish. And Xiaoma was stunned. He did not expect the old man to play such a shameless trick. Before he could think about how to deal with it, Elder Nangong's right hand shook slightly. He had already flashed the spear again and stabbed it straight at Xiaoma's chest. Not expecting the opponent to make a move so quickly, Xiaoma was taken aback. He quickly shrank his body into the flying sword and manipulated the flying sword to avoid the sharp edge of the spear. He then circled around the living room and stopped next to the damaged wall. Understanding Xiaoma's intentions, Elder Nangong raised his eyebrows and said sarcastically, "Don't tell me you want to rescue your master? He has been seriously injured by me. Even if he is rescued, it will be..." Elder Nangong's voice suddenly stopped mid-sentence. It was as if someone had grabbed his neck and he was unable to speak. His expression became serious as he stared at the pile of broken bricks. He could feel that the ruins that buried Xiao Chen had not moved at all before, but now it began to faintly exude a terrifying aura. It was as if a sleeping ancient behemoth had yawned and was about to open its eyes and wake up. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, a vigorous figure suddenly rushed out of the ruins, bringing with it a trail of dust, bursting out with a suffocating pressure. It rotated slightly in the air, and then slowly landed on the suspended flying sword. It was Xiao Chen himself with a bloodstain on the corner of his mouth. Exalted immortal master. Gong Xiaoxi cheered, his eyes flashing with admiration and worship. His master was still the best. Even after being knocked down, he could still stand up energetically. Xiao Chen. Hongzhu saw Xiao Chen floating in the air, but only called out a single word, a trace of doubt flashing across his face. Why does Xiao Chen's husband seem a little different from before? Ignorant Junior, you're just at the peak of the mysterious ascension stage. What's so great about you? A cold voice suddenly sounded in the room. Xiao Chen wiped away the bloodstain on the corner of his mouth, a cold killing intent flashing across his eyes. He quickly drove the flying sword toward Elder Nangong, clenching his fist tightly, the surging yuan qi covering the surface of his fist rapidly expanding, and then he punched out with all his strength. Elder Nangong's mouth twitched slightly, feeling strange in his heart. In addition to Hongzhu, he could also clearly feel that the boy in front of him seemed to have suddenly changed into a different person. Not only did his strength skyrocket, even the tone of his voice had changed. However, when Elder Nangong saw Xiao Chen charging at him, he did not dare to be negligent. Without any time to think, he hurriedly placed the white rhombus-shaped shield in front of him. He circulated his essence with all his might to resist this earth-shattering attack. Boom! As the fist and shield collided, a muffled thunderous explosion reverberated back and forth in the reception room, causing everyone present to feel a buzzing sound in their ears. Many people even involuntarily took a step back, feeling a stifling pain in their chests. After this one move, Elder Nangong felt his left hand go numb, but he did not have time to move his wrist, and immediately looked at his diamond shield. With one look, Elder Nangong's expression immediately changed. He was shocked to discover that his invincible white diamond-shaped shield had actually been smashed into a fine crack. But before he could make any counterattack, Elder Nangong saw a black shadow from the corner of his eye, hand holding a bluish-purple flying sword, suddenly slashing at him from the side. Elder Nangong did not dare to use his shield to block. He hurriedly waved the black spear in his right hand, blocking Xiao Chen's slashing sword. But in his heart, he was very surprised. Even his shield had a crack. Why did this boy seem to be fine? In fact, Xiao Chen's hand was also faintly aching at the moment, but his body was currently temporarily controlled by the Elder Heaven Ancestor, so although he could feel the pain, he could not do anything about it. He could only quietly stay in the sea of consciousness, letting the Elder Heaven Ancestor do whatever he wanted. After using the black spear to block the flying sword, and after dodging Xiao Chen's leg sweep, Elder Nangong finally recovered, took a big step back, and cautiously stared at Xiao Chen. I can't believe that at such a young age, you actually know how to hide your strength. There was a hint of killing intent in Elder Nangong's tone, but even if you are already at the peak of the profound ascension stage, I will still kill you today. At this time, Elder Nangong wanted to kill Xiao Chen, not only because of the mission, but also because this boy had this kind of cultivation at such a young age. He must be an amazing genius, and there must be a very strong force behind him. Now that the situation between him and Xiao Chen was already in a deadlock, if he let him go, sooner or later, Xiao Chen would become a threat to the Xianyan sect. Elder Heaven Ancestor smiled coldly. He did not reply, but manipulated Xiao Chen's body. His right hand punched fiercely, once again hitting the white diamond shield of Elder Nangong. His left hand condensed an ice ball technique, and threw it towards Elder Nangong's knee. Hee, you really are young and inexperienced. Do you think you can break my shield with just your flesh and blood? Elder Nangong saw Xiao Chen's action, and a trace of contempt appeared on his face. However, as soon as he finished speaking, he heard a crack in his ear. Another crack appeared on his diamond-shaped shield, and this crack was obviously much bigger than the previous one. What? How is this possible? Elder Nangong was just about to exclaim. He felt a sudden cold suddenly approaching his leg. He did not have time to look down to see what it was. He immediately dodged it. Although he dodged the ice ball technique, Elder Nangong was shocked again and again. His original keen insight of the surrounding environment was somewhat weakened. After taking 2 steps back, his feet suddenly slipped, and his whole body lost its center of gravity, falling hard on the ground. It was as embarrassing as one could imagine. Chapter 1444. Elder Nangong was still in a daze from the fall. He raised his head in bewilderment and realized that a thin layer of frost had formed on the ground. It looked like it was caused by the ice ball that the kid had tossed earlier. I didn't really want to kill anyone. Elder Tian sighed softly and shook his head. He stared pitifully at Elder Nan Gong, who was sitting on the ground. His tone of voice was filled with murderous intent as he said, "However, you actually dared to steal my treasure. You're courting death. I'll fulfill your wish." After speaking, Elder Tian's lips curled into a cold smile. With a leap, he once again flew into the air. The surging yuan qi within his body surged out violently and condensed into a huge yuan qi vortex in his right fist. He then fiercely smashed it towards Elder Nan Gong. Elder Nan Gong, who was sitting on the ground, saw this and the corners of his mouth twitched. Alarm bells rang in his heart and he immediately rolled to his feet. He quickly chanted an incantation and combined the black and white jade artifacts into one with a pa sound. As Elder Nangong poured his yuan qi into it without holding back, the black and white jade artifact gradually emitted a gentle but not dazzling golden light. After the light spread out, it slowly covered Elder Nangong's body and formed a cloak-like golden battle robe. Seeing that Xiao Chen's fist was about to land on his body, Elder Nangong gritted his teeth and raised all the yuan qi in his body to the limit. He then stretched out his hand and suddenly pulled on the battle robe on his body. The golden battle robe once again turned into a stream of light and condensed in Elder Nangong's palm. It quickly changed shape and became a shining golden blade. Elder Nangong did not say anything and immediately swung the sharp blade towards Elder Heaven Ancestor's fist. The people of Burning Sky faction were stunned. This magic weapon was too heaven-defying, wasn't it? One black and one white could turn into a shield and a spear. When combined, it could turn into a defensive battle robe. But with just a casual tug, it turned into a dagger. No wonder this Elder Nangong was so arrogant. It turned out that he was full of confidence with a divine weapon in his hand. There was a series of bangs in the air as Elder Heaven Ancestor's Yuan Qi fist and Elder Nangong's golden blade intertwined. Like two poisonous snakes biting each other, they fiercely fought back and forth, each wanting to devour the other. However, after more than a dozen exchanges, the strength of both sides seemed to be in a state of equal strength, unable to determine the victor. At this moment, Hong Zhu and Gong Shaoxi were extremely anxious. They really wanted to help Xiao Qin, but in this kind of high-level confrontation, with their meager skills, there was no way they could interfere at all. Even if they forcefully interfered, they would be beaten and defeated at any moment. Coupled with the fact that there were still 5 profound cloud sect disciples standing in a row in front of them, not even the slightest gap could be seen. Therefore, Hong Zhu and Gong Shaoxi could only stand where they were, staring unblinkingly at the situation in front of them with worry written all over their faces. In contrast, the profound cloud sect disciples looked extremely calm, as if they were not worried at all that Elder Nangong would be defeated. In their view, with the current situation, one of them would be the first to fall. That exalted immortal Xiao had already been injured, so he definitely would not be able to fight for long. Even if both sides were to be injured, they would still be able to rush forward in time to save Elder Nangong and kill that so-called exalted immortal Xiao. Boom! After the two had fought for a long time, a violent explosion of yuan qi suddenly rang out. The two who had been fighting each other first trembled slightly before explosively retreating through the air. Elder Nangong's figure flashed and returned behind the 5 disciples. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. The golden battle robe on his body had also disappeared. Elder Heaven Ancestor had retreated to Hong Zhu's side with a very gloomy expression. His originally rosy skin had also become deathly white. He supported himself with both hands on his knees and panted heavily. Yay! Big Sister's husband is still the most powerful. That old thing has been beaten until he spat out blood, but you're completely fine. Hong Zhu waved her little fist and cheered. She glared at Elder Nangong in a provocative manner, then happily grabbed Xiao Chen's arm and asked curiously, "Oh, that's right, hubby, why did your voice suddenly change just now? Why did it sound like an old man to me? Little demonin. Hurry up and take Hong Zhu away from here." Ugh. Xiao Chen's voice had already returned to its original state, but he did not immediately answer Hong Zhu's question. Instead, he gave a command to the flying sword with great difficulty. After giving the command intermittently, Xiaochen finally could not help but let out a muffled groan. He clutched his chest with a pained expression and knelt to the ground. Ha! Cough, cough, cough. Elder Nan Gong's hoarse laughter came from not far away. He wiped away the blood at the corner of his mouth and threw a few pieces into the air. They were black and white jade artifacts that had already been cracked into several pieces and had lost their luster. Boy, you didn't expect this, did you? Elder Nan Gong's expression was a mixture of pride and ferocity. Coupled with the remaining blood on his face, he looked very terrifying. You are indeed very strong. If it wasn't for the protection of this old man's magic weapon, perhaps I would have really died in your hands today. Xiao Chang. Could it be that you? Finally realizing the seriousness of the problem, Hongzhu's original joyful expression instantly disappeared and turned into a look of panic. He could not help but cry out involuntarily. At this time, a little demon had already driven the flying sword to Hongzhu's side, intending to follow Xiao Chen's orders to take her away. However, before she could act, she was pushed away by Hongzhu. After pushing the flying sword away, Hongzhu squatted down and reached out to help Xiao Chen up. However, when he looked up, he found that the light in Xiao Chen's eyes had begun to gradually dissipate. Xiao Chen struggled to maintain the last bit of his consciousness. He shook his head powerlessly, feeling extremely bitter in his heart. After the last clash between Elder Heaven Ancestor and Elder Nan Gong, Xiao Chen, who had been staying in the Sea of Consciousness, noticed that the aura of Elder Heaven Ancestor's primordial spirit had suddenly weakened to the point of imminent danger. Xiao Chen made a prompt decision and immediately took over his own body. However, as soon as he took over, he found that his injuries were much more serious than Elder Nan Gong's. At this time, several important meridians in his body had been broken and he could not circulate his primordial spirit. He was basically relying on the last breath of his primordial spirit to hold on. That was why Xiao Chen asked an little demon to take Hongzhu away immediately. Otherwise, with Elder Nan Gong's unrelenting attitude, if he targeted Hongzhu, the consequences would be unimaginable. So your name is Xiao Chang. That's good too. There are too many nameless people who have died in my hands. You are still an opponent worth remembering. A gloomy voice sounded in the living room. Elder Nan Gong stared at Xiao Chen, who was kneeling on the ground, and said coldly, "But that's all. Next year today will be the anniversary of your death." Chapter 1445. As soon as he finished speaking, Elder Nan Gong gave a meaningful glance to the disciples surrounding him. Immediately, two of them executed their movement skills and rushed in front of Xiao Chen and Hongzhu. Circulating their mental cultivation techniques, they displayed the cultivation of a perfect nascent soul cultivator. Then, they simultaneously took out their own magic tools and fiercely slashed at the two. "Husband, husband, wake up." Hongzhu repeatedly shook Xiao Chen, but the latter did not react at all. It was obvious that he had already lost consciousness. Hongzhu watched as the two magic tools, which were flashing with a strange light, approached menacingly while Xiao Chen remained motionless in his arms. His mind raced at lightning speed, and he no longer cared about his panic and despair. His eyes shifted, and he caught a glimpse of the flying sword beside him. He recalled the order Xiao Chen had given him earlier, and immediately reached out to grab the hilt of the flying sword. "Go! Get us out of here!" Hongzhu tightly hugged Xiao Chen with his other hand and sternly shouted at the flying sword. Boom boom! The two disciples' magic tools simultaneously smashed into the ground, creating two deep crescent-shaped pits. Immediately, crushed stones flew in all directions and dust rose into the air, filling the parlor and causing everyone present to cough repeatedly. They could not even see what was in front of them, and could only continuously wave their hands in vain in an attempt to disperse the dust in front of them. When the dust finally dispersed, everyone focused their eyes and saw that Xiao Chen and Hongzhu had long since disappeared from the parlor. The two disciples looked at each other in shock and hastily chased after them outside the house. As far as the eye could see, the two of them could only see a black dot rapidly disappearing into the distance in the sky. It seemed that they would not be able to catch up to it in the span of a few breaths. The two disciples looked at each other in dismay. Helpless, they could only return to the house with dejected expressions and apologize to Elder Nan Gong. Humph. Such a powerful magic tool was only used to escape in the end. What a reckless waste of God's gift. Elder Nan Gong did not blame his subordinates. He merely rolled his eyes and snappily ridiculed them. At this moment, the entire guest hall was terrifyingly quiet. The people of the Burning Sky faction could only watch helplessly as the consecrator they had painstakingly invited was beaten to the point of escaping. They couldn't help but feel anxious and fearful, not knowing how that Elder Nan Gong would deal with them. Cough cough. Elder Nan Gong held his chest and coughed a few times. Then, he straightened his body and turned around to look at Duan Suqing and Gong Shaoxi. He said arrogantly, "I believe you have already seen it. That arrogant Xiao Chang, who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, has already been killed by me. Now, quickly prepare a few well-equipped rooms for us to have a good rest." Go to hell. Why should I prepare a room for you? Do you think you're... Gong Shaoxi was so angry that he glared at Duan Suqing and cursed. But before he could finish, Duan Suqing pulled him aside. Elder Nan Gong, please don't lower yourself to the same level as this kid. He's young and hasn't seen much, so he's not very sensible. Duan Suqing apologized again and again. Elder Nan Gong's expression was a little cold. He glared at Gong Shaoxi, but didn't flare up. He only snorted unhappily. Duan Suqing pulled back Gong Shaoxi, who was about to go berserk again. He first gave him a look, then asked tentatively, "Allow me to ask a question. I wonder if Elder Nan Gong wants to stay here to enjoy the scenery of the Burning Sky faction, or if you're not feeling well and need to recuperate for a while. This way, I can arrange more suitable services for you." Actually, Duan Suqing also had his own plans. Everyone had seen the scene of Xiao Chang and Elder Nan Gong fighting. Although Xiao Chang was indeed defeated and left, Elder Nan Gong also vomited blood and was injured. Now that he suddenly requested to rest in the Burning Sky faction, people couldn't help but be a little suspicious. If Elder Nan Gong was really seriously injured and wanted to use the Burning Sky faction to recuperate, then Duan Suqing would have to think it over. Should he bear the humiliation and obediently bear the burden, or should he fly into a rage and directly exterminate these people? I didn't know that Sect Master Duan had such a breadth of mind. You don't even have the slightest bit of reaction when your consecrator was exterminated. Admirable, admirable. Elder Nan Gong glanced at Duan Suqing, sneered, and said unhurriedly, "I'm not recuperating, nor am I going on a holiday. This old man considered that you would need time to take inventory of those heavenly treasures, so I purposely stayed for a few days to let you carefully examine them before handing them over to us." The corner of Duan Suqing's mouth twitched. He knew that his little thoughts had probably been seen through by Elder Nan Gong. He could only smile awkwardly, call over a disciple beside him, and give a few instructions. Then, he forced a smile and said to Elder Nan Gong, that, "The rooms have already been prepared for you. Please follow this disciple and stay there. If you have any other instructions, you can also directly tell this disciple." That's more like it. Elder Nan Gong nodded in satisfaction. Then, he brought a few disciples and swaggered out the door with the Burning Sky faction people. When passing by Gong Shaoxi, Elder Nan Gong gave him a rather disdainful look, and sneered, "Little guy, learn more from your sect master. Remember, your Burning Sky faction is just an insignificant small sect. Don't think that just because you have the protection of a trash profound ascending stage expert, you can do whatever you want. Our profound cloud sect only needs to move a finger to destroy you at any time." After saying that, Elder Nan Gong laughed to the sky, and left the reception hall amidst the compliments of the 5 disciples. "You." Gritting his teeth, Gong Shaoxi stared at the departing Elder Nan Gong and his subordinates. He was so angry that he clenched his fists. His face was ashen, and he wanted to rush up and perish together with them. "Shaoxi, I know you can't take this lying down." Duan Suqing patted Gong Shaoxi's shoulder, and let out a long sigh. Staring at the backs of those people, he said bitterly, "Actually, I also hate that arrogant Elder Nan Gong. But you also know that the Profound Clouds sect is after all an outstanding sect in the cultivation world. With the current situation of our Burning Sky faction, we don't even have the strength to fight to the death with them. I understand, but that old man's words are too infuriating. He clearly doesn't put any of us in his eyes. Gong Xiaoxi took a few deep breaths, but he was still somewhat indignant. Gong Xiaoxi wasn't really stupid. His own master couldn't gain any advantage in front of Elder Nan Gong, and was even seriously injured. Now that his master's whereabouts were unknown, it showed just how unfathomable Elder Nan Gong's strength was. He had just broken through to the nascent soul stage. If he were to go up and provoke Elder Nan Gong based on his hot-bloodedness, it would be like a moth flying into a flame. Therefore, Gong Xiaoxi could only suppress the anger in his heart and wait for an opportunity to take revenge. Chapter 1446. Sigh, who said it wasn't? Originally, I was planning to. Duan Suqing paused. In order to prevent Gong Xiaoxi from being impulsive, he didn't say what he was thinking just now. He only helplessly advised, forget it, forget it. Don't be too rash in everything. Let's go back and think about it at length. That's the only way. Now, I can only hope that Immortal Master is lucky and can successfully escape this calamity. As for those treasures, it doesn't matter. If that old thing has the cheek to ask for them, there's no harm in giving them all to him. Gong Xiaoxi shook his head in annoyance. He bid farewell to Duan Suqing and prepared to find Gong Ruidong to report the situation just now. He wanted to see if Gong Ruidong could help him with some ideas. Looking at the messy parlor after the battle, Duan Suqing felt a headache coming on and rubbed his temples. He ordered the disciples present to clean up the place and ran to supervise the inventory of the treasures. Duan Suqing planned to personally comb through all the treasures and hide some of the higher-grade treasures in advance. He didn't want all the good things to be snatched away by Elder Nangong. If that happened, he would really regret it till his intestines turned green. The Burning Heavens faction was in chaos for a few days. At the gate of a house a few hundred kilometers away from the Lucian prefecture, two figures of an old man and a middle-aged man walked out. The middle-aged man was the mysterious young master. After a long period of medication and recuperation, the injuries on his face had finally completely healed. The bandages that were originally wrapped around his face were completely removed and he returned to his normal appearance. The young master, who had just recovered, immediately began to deal with some matters that were previously inconvenient for him to handle personally. The first thing he did was to call Elder Shen and ask him to immediately bring him to a secret prison where prisoners were locked up. He was prepared to personally interrogate an extremely important prisoner. After walking for a while with many twists and turns, Elder Shen led the young master to an extremely ordinary-looking house. After passing through the gate, the two of them did not walk in the direction of the room. Instead, they went straight to the back garden and walked to the side of a fake mountain. It was unknown what mechanism Elder Shen stretched out his hand and turned, but a door suddenly appeared at the bottom of the rockery. After pushing it open, it was pitch black inside. Elder Shen took the lead and walked in, and the young master followed closely behind. After the two of them entered the door slowly closed and turned back into a rockery. From the outside, there was no trace of it at all. Passing through the dark and damp walkway, the two of them arrived outside of a relatively luxurious and clean prison cell. Elder Shen took the first step and respectfully pushed open the door. After which, he bent his waist and waited by the side. The young master nodded his head in satisfaction. With his hands behind his back, he walked in with his chest puffed out and his hands behind his back. However, when he entered the cell and saw the woman locked inside, he couldn't help but freeze. He stood rooted to the spot and didn't recover for a long time. The woman was originally sitting on the chair in a daze, bored to death. When she heard the footsteps, she raised her beautiful face and glanced at the person with her beautiful eyes. Her body trembled and her expression was a little sluggish. It was actually this guy? Why is he here? Isn't this too inconceivable? It's you. After a long while, the two of them finally came back to their senses. The young master's eyes were full of confusion, and the beautiful woman was also confused. They pointed at each other and shouted in unison with faces full of surprise. Qing Menjing, how did you enter the cultivation world? The young master furrowed his brows and took 2 steps forward, staring at Qing Menjing as he asked. Looking at Qing Menjing's beautiful face, the young master didn't have the slightest bit of appreciation. He thought to himself, no wonder his eyelids had jumped for no reason when he heard the name Qing Yao Yao. So it was Qing Menjing, that troublesome girl. What's it to you? Qing Menjing snorted and rolled her eyes at the young master with a face full of disgust. She said huffily, I didn't think that you wouldn't die. You're quite lucky. However, when my servant, Xiao Chen, arrives, you'll still die. When he heard Xiao Chen's name, the young master's expression changed slightly. He muttered to himself for a moment, then stared at Qing Menjing and asked, You've actually cultivated to the nascent soul great circle in such a short amount of time? How did you do it? Could it be that there's some sort of special cultivation method? Don't ask me so many questions. Since you know how powerful it is, then don't offend me. Qing Menjing fiercely waved her little fist and bared her teeth at the young master. You'd better know your place and let me go. Otherwise, I'll find Xiao Chen later and make you perform some sort of flying performance. I'll just fly you to your death. You're dreaming. You'd better stay here obediently for me. The young master was so angry that he clenched his teeth. He reckoned that he wouldn't be able to get anything out of this little chili pepper, so he simply turned around and left the cell with a flick of his sleeves. When he walked out of the cell, Elder Shen hurriedly lowered his head in fear. He had been standing outside the entire time, and although he couldn't hear what was being said inside clearly, the tone of the two wasn't very pleasant to the ear. He didn't know if there was some sort of conflict, so he couldn't help but feel uneasy. The young master stood in front of the cell for a while, his expression constantly changing. It was obvious that he was thinking intensely. Elder Shen didn't dare to speak and stood respectfully on the spot, waiting. Let's go. After a while, the young master seemed to have finally made some sort of decision. He simply said 2 words and then walked out. Elder Shen hurriedly followed behind him. After leaving the dungeon and walking out of the fake mountain, the young master looked left and right. When he didn't see anyone, he lowered his voice and instructed Elder Shen, later, take my warrant and bring that magic tool over. Control that little girl inside. Don't let her have any way to cause trouble. Elder Shen was slightly startled and looked in the direction of the dungeon. He didn't really understand why this little girl who had been obediently staying in the dungeon would suddenly cause trouble. However, he didn't dare to disobey the young master's orders, so he immediately nodded and agreed before retreating. The young master let out a breath and put his hands behind his back. On the surface, he pretended to be calm, but in reality, he hurriedly walked to a rather secluded room in the courtyard. He quickly poured a basin of water, then took out a voice transmission talisman and threw it into the water. He silently muttered a few words and waited for the other party's reply. Young master, I've fortunately completed the task that you asked me to do. I've already taken care of it. A wave of bubbles quickly surfaced in the water, then an old voice rang out. Oh. Elder Nangong is indeed extraordinary. I really didn't misjudge you. The young master nodded in satisfaction and asked again, since the task has been completed, why didn't you return immediately? Did anything happen? Chapter 1447. This. Elder Nangong's voice was a little hesitant, but he still answered honestly, in the process of carrying out the task, I accidentally got injured, so I need some time to recuperate. Do you have any new instructions? If there are other urgent things to do, then you may need to send someone else. What? You're injured? The young master was shocked and asked eagerly, Elder Nangong, your cultivation is so high, how can you be injured? Has the opponent's strength already surpassed yours? In the young master's impression, Elder Nangong should be at the peak of the profound ascension stage. Although he was not the top expert in the entire cultivation world, it should be more than enough to deal with the Burning Sky sect. He didn't expect that he would be injured. Elder Nangong stood in the room of the burning sky sect with a slightly bitter smile on his face. It turned out that Duan Suching's guess was right, he really was injured. He just stayed in the burning sky sect under the guise of waiting for the treasure to be counted and recuperated. But even so, Elder Nangong really didn't care about this little injury. After all, he had been at the peak of the profound ascension stage for a long time, so his injury was much lighter than Xiao Chen's. Moreover, he had the most precious healing pill of the profound clouds sect with him, plus the 5 disciples by his side, so he only needed to recuperate quietly for a few days. It's just a small injury, it's not a big deal. Thank you for your concern, young master. I can go back in a few days. Elder Nangong collected his thoughts and said to the water basin. That's good. I don't know if Elder Nangong has investigated the opponent's background. The young master's voice quickly came back. It was obvious that he was more concerned about the situation of the opponent. I did not investigate his background in detail. However, when I was fighting against him, I heard others call him Xiao Chang. Furthermore, the magic tools he used were extremely unique. There was a flying sword that seemed to have developed intelligence. Furthermore, there was a bluish-purple flame. I suspect that it was a type of heavenly flame. Unfortunately, I was unable to capture it. Elder Nangong frowned and recalled for a while before reporting in detail. Xiao Chang. Xiao Chen. The young master repeated it a few times. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind and he came to a conclusion. This Xiao Chang was most likely the Xiao Chen that Qing Menjing had mentioned. I can't believe he really came to the world of cultivators. Elder Nangong, how was your match with Xiao Chang? After the young master confirmed the suspicions in his heart, he immediately asked, I know that you must have obtained a complete victory. However, I mainly want to know what happened to that fellow in the end. Oh, that brat was already on the verge of death after being beaten by me. He was heavily injured and on the verge of death. Although he was carried away by a woman who used that flying sword to escape, based on the injuries he suffered, he probably won't be able to live for long. Elder Nangong said casually. Oh. Elder Nangong, are you sure that he won't be able to live? Did you send people to continue tracking him? The young master did not give up and said in a deep voice, according to what I know, that fellow is extremely cunning. It would be best if you could personally. No, it would be best if you could bring his corpse back and let me personally confirm it. The reason why he was so cautious was because the young master understood Xiao Chen better. He was very familiar with his unkillable cockroach-like nature. Even if he was beaten to a state where he was on his last breath, as long as he was not killed directly, he would make a comeback in no time. There had never been a situation where he died from serious injuries. I don't think that's necessary, right? Elder Nangong's tone was somewhat impatient. Do you still have any doubts about me? I dare to guarantee that that brat definitely won't be able to live. You don't have to worry about this. In actuality, Elder Nangong did not have much respect for this young master. At that time, he had only agreed to deal with Xiao Chen because the great master had personally stepped forward. Originally, Elder Nangong already felt a little sullen when he was being ordered around by a little brat. In the end, the other party actually did not trust him. This was simply preposterous. Alright, then rest well for a while. It won't be too late to come back after you've recovered. I will send people to confirm again. You don't have to worry about it. The young master could naturally hear the impatience in Elder Nangong's voice, but he did not dare to continue bickering with him. He could only helplessly pacify him. As the second largest sect in the cultivation world, the Profound Clouds sect had a strong foundation. The young master felt that there was no need to offend them for no reason. It was better to think of a way himself. Just as the young master poured the water out of the basin, Elder Shen knocked on the door and walked in. Young master, I have already used that special magic tool to tie up that girl with the surname Cheng. Elder Shen cupped his hands and reported in a serious manner, as you expected, that magic tool can indeed suppress the vitality in her body, causing her to be unable to use her true strength. Then what should we do with her next? The young master thought for a while and instructed, "Put her aside for now. There is no need to care about her or interrogate her. In any case, there will definitely be no results from the interrogation." Elder Shen's face instantly turned pale. He stammered and wanted to apologize, "Sorry, young master, we tried our best, but..." Before Elder Shen could finish speaking, the young master waved his hand and said indifferently, "I have no intention of blaming you. I know this girl. She has always been a thorn, so there is no need to care about her for now. I have other things for you to do. Alright, please instruct me, young master. I will definitely do my best to complete the task you have given me." When Elder Shen heard that he was not going to be punished, he immediately became spirited and patted his chest. The young master nodded his head and took out a map of the cultivation world from the bookshelf. He spread it out on the table and looked at it carefully. Then, he used a pen to circle an area on the map and instructed, "Bring more people and carefully search this area for the whereabouts of a person called Xiao Chen. That person might also change his name to Xiao Chong. After you find him, immediately kill him and bring his corpse back to me. Do you understand?" Understood. Subordinate obeys. When Elder Shen heard that this task was much simpler than interrogating a hostage without any torture, he immediately nodded his head happily. After listening to the young master's description of Xiao Chen's appearance, Elder Shen left the room. He called a few profound ascending stage experts and a group of nascent soul peak stage subordinates. He took the map that the young master gave him and rushed towards the marked location. Chapter 1448. On Xiao Chen's side, Hongzhu gripped the hilt of his flying sword in one hand and carried the unconscious Xiao Chen in the other. In order to escape from the Burning Sky faction, he was like a headless fly that was randomly bumping around, until he finally ran into an unknown mountain forest. Sensing that Xiao Chen's breathing was gradually weakening, Hongzhu could not help but panic. Lowering his head, he searched around, and finally found a suitable cave. He immediately ordered the flying sword to stop, and landed outside the cave. Hongzhu first had the flying sword explore the cave, and after not finding anything out of the ordinary, he supported Xiao Chen into the cave. After finding a relatively large and flat rock, he carefully placed Xiao Chen on top of it, then hurriedly took out the medicinal pills he had brought with him and stuffed them into his mouth. These medicinal pills had been specially brought over by Hongzhu from the martial arts world, and were basically refined from rare medicinal herbs that the Hong family had accumulated over 100 years. Moreover, the majority of them had very good healing effects, and even if one was able to eat one of them, there would still be hope for a full recovery. At this moment, Hongzhu was already panicking, and no matter what kind of medicinal pills he took, he stuffed them all into Xiao Chen's mouth. Although these healing pills melted in Xiao Chen's mouth the moment they entered his mouth, and all of them were successfully ingested, the healing effects were not very obvious. The only thing that could be seen was that Xiao Chen's complexion had become slightly rosier, but his entire body was still completely motionless. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that his life was still quietly and swiftly slipping away. Hongzhu anxiously stood by the side for a while, and fed all the medicinal pills he could use to Xiao Chen, but there was still no improvement. At this moment, Hongzhu finally realized that just relying on medicinal pills would not be able to solve Xiao Chen's problem. The anxious Hongzhu could not help but stand up, and anxiously paced back and forth in the cave, racking his brain to think of a way to save Xiao Chen. After pondering for a long time, Hongzhu's eyes suddenly lit up. He quickly returned to Xiao Chen's side and helped him into a cross-legged sitting position against the stone wall. Glancing around the empty cave, Hongzhu clenched his teeth, quickly and neatly took off his clothes and placed them aside. After that, he sat down cross-legged and placed his palms against Xiao Chen's, intending to enter a dual cultivation state with him. Just now, Hongzhu suddenly recalled that he had once heard Xiao Chen mention that a cultivator's origin qi could aid in healing injuries. Although he did not know exactly how to do it, Xiao Chen was currently unconscious. No matter how Hongzhu thought about it, it seemed like the only way to transfer his origin qi to Xiao Chen's body was to rely on the method of dual cultivation. In Hongzhu's mind, after he transmitted his own origin chi over, he would then attempt to guide it. Perhaps he would be able to use it to heal Xiao Chen's injuries. Just as Hongzhu was calming her mind and circulating her mental cultivation method, and then, through her palms, began to transfer her yuan qi into Xiao Chen's body, she suddenly felt a powerful energy suddenly appear, completely sucking away all of her yuan qi. Before Hongzhu could react, her yuan qi reappeared and was swiftly reflected back at her from Xiao Chen's palms. Caught off guard, Hongzhu was directly struck by the yuan qi she had sent out, and her entire body was sent flying. Pfff, Hongzhu's back was fiercely smashed against the stone wall, and she could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. The powerful impact had shaken her entire body to the point of dizziness, causing her to see stars, and her qi and blood to churn. If Hongzhu had not been clenching her teeth and using her tenacious willpower to support herself, she might have fainted long ago. How could this be? Hongzhu sat on the ground in a daze for a long time, repeatedly muttering to herself, her body like an autumn leaf in the wind, trembling incessantly. She climbed to her feet with great difficulty, and when she saw Xiao Chen quietly lying on the ground, not moving at all, Hongzhu's eyes instantly turned red, and 2 streams of tears of grievance slid down her cheeks. After taking a few steps forward, Hongzhu threw herself onto Xiao Chen's body, her heart filled with sorrow as she sobbed, "Xiao Chen, just what do I have to do to wake you up? How can I restore you to your original state? I've already used every method within my power, but why can't I succeed? Aren't you usually very powerful? Can't you wake up and teach me? Say something." Gently stroking Xiao Chen's cheeks with trembling hands, Hongzhu could clearly feel that the latter's life was gradually fading away. She could not help but feel great sorrow in her heart. The emotions that she had been suppressing at the bottom of her heart finally erupted, and she tightly hugged Xiao Chen's lifeless body. Xiao Chen, can you hear me calling you?" Pressing her face against Xiao Chen's palm, Hongzhu softly whispered, "Why are you always so cold to me? Do you hate me a lot? Can you answer me seriously for once? Do you know how much pressure I've been enduring to silently like you? I've been a rebellious child since I was a child, and I can even ignore the advice of my family. It may seem like I'm free and unbridled, but can you understand the pain of being despised by your closest kin? You must be able to understand. Weren't you also chased out of the house by your family? From this, it can be seen that we are in the same boat. No wonder when I first saw you, I felt a sense of kinship. Xiao Chen, you little scoundrel. You've always been hot and cold to big sister, but now you've finally behaved yourself, haven't you? You can only lie flat on the ground and let big sister tease you, but why do I wish that you can bully me again? Even if it's just to hide a little further away." Lifting his face from Xiao Chen's hand, Hongzhu's face was already streaked with tears. It was already late at night, and the silvery white moonlight spilled over the cave entrance, illuminating the dark green vines and branches. It looked very tranquil and peaceful, but the atmosphere in the cave was very solemn and sorrowful. Staring at Xiao Chen's pale cheeks, Hongzhu could not help but feel a wave of sorrow in her heart. Could it be that he really could not escape this calamity? Could it be that she really had to watch him stop breathing and leave her behind? Gritting her teeth, Hongzhu put on some clothes, picked up Xiao Chen, and walked out of the cave. Leaning against a rock, she rested her head on Xiao Chen's chest, her eyes gazing at the twinkling stars in the sky. "Xiao Chen, look at that brightest star, it seems to be the Big Dipper. Many people like to rely on it to guide them, and in fact, you are very much like my Big Dipper. As long as I can follow you, I will definitely not go wrong. Xiao Chen, this is the first time that Big Sister has accompanied you to watch the stars, and it might also be the last time we do so. In the past, I really wanted to find a chance to have a romantic moment with you, and now, my wish has finally come true. It's just that I never thought that it would be under such terrible circumstances, hee. Reaching out to stroke her hair, Hongzhu bitterly smiled and shook her head, her voice somewhat choked with emotion. Chapter 1449. Actually, when we were at Little Hong's pharmacy, I already started to like you a little. I began to quietly pay attention to you, and even developed a good impression of you. I just didn't have the time to tell you. I always pretended to tease you. Woo woo woo. As she spoke, Hongzhu sensed that Xiao Chen's body temperature was slowly dropping, her breathing was becoming extremely weak, and her heartbeat was also becoming slower and slower. The despairing Hongzhu was finally unable to continue speaking. She covered her mouth and sobbed in a low voice, tears pouring out of her eyes like a broken dam. She tightly grasped Xiao Chen's arm, feeling so much pain that even her heart began to wrench. After an unknown period of time, Xiao Chen's body, which Hongzhu had been leaning against, had already become ice-cold and lifeless. Her tears had also finally slowly stopped, and her complexion had gradually calmed down. Hongzhu sniffled, first wiped away the tears on her face, and then took off a white porcelain earring from her earlobe. With a casual pinch, the earring broke with a crack, revealing a purplish-black pill. Since you've left, there's no need for me to continue living in this world. Wait for me at the Bridge of Helplessness, we'll be on our way together. Hongzhu carefully tidied up Xiao Chen's clothes, as she spoke in a gentle voice. As soon as she finished speaking, Hongzhu stuffed the purplish-black pill into her mouth. When it entered her mouth, she first felt a trace of bitterness, which was quickly followed by a faint sweetness. Hongzhu smiled faintly, as she gently leaned against Xiao Chen's chest. As her consciousness gradually grew blurry, she quietly closed her eyes, silently waiting for the effects of the pill to take effect, so that she could fearlessly welcome the moment when death would descend upon her. Suddenly, a fierce gale began to blow all around them, uprooting many flowers and plants. Not far away, a large and sturdy locust tree was also swaying incessantly, its leaves drifting down along with the wind, forming a huge vortex that sparkled with white light that gradually approached Xiao Chen and Hongzhu's position. Just as the whirlpool arrived in front of Xiao Chen and Hongzhu, it immediately stopped spinning. Many leaves and weeds fell to the ground with a rustling sound, while the white light gradually condensed and transformed into the illusory figure of an old man. Standing in front of the two, the old man looked at the pale-faced and lifeless Xiao Chen, as well as the smiling Hongzhu, whose eyes were tightly closed. He shook his head slightly and sighed helplessly. Then, he extended his hand and injected a strand of white gas into Hongzhu's body. After that, he placed his hand behind his back and stood there, quietly waiting. Cough cough cough. Not long after, Hongzhu suddenly coughed violently a few times, opened his mouth and spat out a puddle of black liquid, and then slowly opened his eyes. Blinking her eyes in confusion, Hongzhu could only see a ball of white light faintly appearing in front of her eyes. She shook her head to clear her head, then weakly said, What's going on? Am I already dead? Why is there a white light? Little girl, don't be silly, you're still alive. The white silhouette said with a frown. I'm still alive? Hongzhu repeated those words with a confused expression, clearly unable to react. The white silhouette stealthily glanced at Xiao Chen, then turned back to look at Hongzhu and asked, Little girl, you're so young, how could you take things so hard? You're clearly alive and well, so why did you come to this barren mountain to die? Hongzhu finally came to her senses, but when she saw the white silhouette in front of her, she immediately jumped in fright. Are you a human or a ghost? The frightened Hongzhu hurriedly dodged to the side, but unexpectedly bumped into a soft and fluffy object. She quickly turned her head to look, only to see that it was the lifeless Xiao Chen lying beside her. Xiao Chen, sob sob sob. Upon seeing Xiao Chen, Hongzhu's sorrowful emotions welled up in his heart once again. It seemed that he really was not dead. He just did not know what had saved him. Sigh. This old man is not a human, nor is he a ghost, but the mountain god of this barren mountain. The white silhouette was not angered by Hongzhu's questioning, and only leisurely paced back and forth in front of the two of them. When she mentioned her identity, she even proudly raised her chin, and her aura seemed to have become much stronger. What? Mountain god? Then you're an immortal? Hongzhu was slightly taken aback, then suddenly thought of something, and immediately pounced towards the old man, but in the end, she missed and fell to the ground. After all, that old man was only a silhouette, and not a real existence. Hongzhu didn't care too much about it, and immediately got up after falling, knelt on the ground, and begged the white silhouette, Great Immortal, can you save my boyfriend? Your boyfriend? What happened to him? The white silhouette stealthily glanced at Xiao Chen, a trace of doubt in her voice. Hongzhu also turned his head to look at Xiao Chen, and felt a pain in his heart. He turned back to look at the silhouette, and said with difficulty, He's already dead, but I think that with your boundless magic power, you should be able to bring him back to life, right? What? You said he's dead? The white silhouette raised her eyebrows in great surprise, then stretched out a slightly illusory hand, and lightly touched Xiao Chen's face. Her face immediately became somewhat displeased, and she blushed and said, Little girl, what kind of nonsense are you spouting? He's clearly still alive. Look at his flushed little face, and his breathing is quite smooth. Which part of him looks like a dead person? Don't try to deceive this old man. No. He's really dead. If you don't believe me, you can. Hongzhu said in an urgent voice, then turned his head to point at Xiao Chen, and with a single glance, her expression suddenly changed. What's going on? Xiao Chen clearly stopped breathing just a moment ago. Why does he seem to be reacting now? Seeing Xiao Chen's pale cheeks slowly turn rosy, Hongzhu could not believe her own eyes. She stupidly knelt on the ground for a moment, then finally realized what was happening, and rushed over to Xiao Chen. With a trembling finger, she took Xiao Chen's breath, and found that he really was breathing. Xiao Chen. Hongzhu's entire person was shrouded in inconceivable ecstasy, and tears once again flowed uncontrollably from her eyes. Although Hongzhu felt joy from the bottom of her heart, there was still a question lingering in her mind. She had clearly seen Xiao Chen's life force disappear, so how did he recover so quickly? But at this moment, Hongzhu did not care about such things. She constantly shook Xiao Chen, calling out his name, hoping that he would open his eyes and look at her, but Xiao Chen still did not respond, and only his steady breathing proved that he was still alive. Chapter 1450. Don't shake him anymore. This boy is just not dead yet, but that doesn't mean that he isn't injured. If you keep shaking him like this, he might die from your shaking again. The white figure looked a little rueful, but he quickly spoke up to stop Hongzhu. Hongzhu was startled and carefully placed Xiao Chen back to his original position. At this moment, a scene suddenly flashed through her mind. When she had begged the white figure to save Xiao Chen, he had touched Xiao Chen's cheek, and then Xiao Chen had regained his breathing. Could it be that it was precisely because he had casually touched Xiao Chen that Xiao Chen had been pulled back from the brink of death? Could it be that this old man shrouded in white light was really the legendary Great Firmament Golden Immortal? This was simply too miraculous. What are you still standing there for? Seeing Hongzhu staring at him in a daze, the white figure seemed a little uncomfortable. He pointed at Xiao Chen and said, although this kid is still alive, a few of the main meridians in his body have been severed. If we don't use medicine to heal them as soon as possible, it's very likely that he'll really die. Lord Great Immortal, I beg you to lend me a hand and show me the way. Xiao Chen, he can't die. Otherwise, I won't be able to continue living. Hongzhu's heart trembled at these words and she knelt down with a thump, begging with all her heart. The white figure stroked his non-existent beard and lowered his head in thought for a moment. Then, under Hongzhu's hopeful gaze, he slowly said, this old man does have a way to save him, but Hongzhu could not help but be wild with joy at the old man's words. She even completely ignored the word, but, and instead asked with an expectant expression, really? You have a way to save Xiao Chen's life? Then, as she spoke, Hongzhu became somewhat hesitant. She was an exceptionally intelligent girl in the first place. Earlier, she had been shocked by Xiao Chen's sudden resurrection. Now that she had calmed down a little, she began to vaguely suspect the old man's motives. They had only met by chance, so why was he willing to save Xiao Chen's life? Moreover, even her own poison had been easily neutralized. This guy, could it be that he had some ulterior motives? You must be very puzzled as to why I would help you expel the poison from your body and even save his life, right? The white figure seemed to have guessed Hong Zhu's thoughts as he smiled faintly and spoke in an indifferent tone. Hong Zhu hesitated for a moment, but still nodded vigilantly. The white shadow chuckled and explained in an unhurried manner, "Actually, I can tell that all of you are kind-hearted people. However, due to a freak combination of factors, you were injured by some extremely vicious and evil people, which is why you ended up in such a state. As a divine immortal, it is my duty to uphold justice, so how can I sit back and do nothing? All right. Then I'll believe you. Please tell me the method to save them as soon as possible. No matter what the conditions are, as long as I can do it, I will definitely do my best." Hong Zhu still had some misgivings in her heart, but she still clenched her teeth and agreed. Although Hong Zhu felt that the white shadow's reasoning was a little strange, after weighing the pros and cons, she could only rely on this so-called divine immortal at the moment. In any case, the situation could not get any worse. As long as the white shadow's request was not too excessive, even if she had to work a little harder, it would still be worth it if she could save Xiao Chen's life. It's very simple. I will first give you a list of medicinal ingredients. As long as you can gather all of these ingredients and boil them into a medicinal soup for him to drink, there will definitely be an effect. However, you will still need to coordinate with a few other auxiliary tasks. If all of them are successful, then it won't be long before he can fully recover. The white shadow chuckled and spoke in an unhurried manner. What medicinal ingredients? Tell me, I will definitely find them. When Hong Zhu heard that the white shadow wanted to boil medicine and not do some strange things, her heart instantly relaxed and she impatiently asked. The white shadowy figure nodded with satisfaction, then reported the names and dosages of those herbs one by one. These medicinal ingredients are all from the inner. After listening to the white shadow recite the prescription, Hong Zhu was somewhat dazed. She had indeed heard of all the medicinal ingredients that the old divine immortal had mentioned, but the biggest problem now was that these medicinal ingredients could only be grown in the inner martial world. They had never been seen in the world of immortal cultivation. The medicinal ingredients and treasures of heaven and earth produced in the inner martial world were completely different from those in the world of immortal cultivation. Even the medicinal ingredients that Xiao Chen had used to boil the medicine for his breakthrough were unique to the world of immortal cultivation and had nothing to do with the inner martial world. According to Xiao Chen, this was because the concentration of spiritual qi in the inner martial world was different from that in the world of immortal cultivation, so the medicinal ingredients grown in the inner martial world were also different. What's wrong? Is there a problem? Seeing the frown on Hong Zhu's face, the white shadow indifferently asked, "Could it be that you're going to shrink back after hearing that there are so many medicinal ingredients?" Hong Zhu hurriedly shook her head in denial and said somewhat gloomily, "Mountain Divine Immortal, although the medicinal ingredients that you mentioned are not too precious, I'm afraid that I can't find them in this place. Is there any other substitute for them?" Don't lose confidence so quickly. Little girl, you seem to be quite smart. I believe that you will definitely have a way to get these medicinal ingredients. The white shadow mysteriously winked, deliberately whetting Hong Zhu's appetite. Hong Zhu frowned. Just as he was worrying about where he could obtain the medicinal ingredients, he heard the white figure continue, "However, the most important thing is not the medicinal ingredients. Rather, while this boy is absorbing the medicinal soup, there is one more thing that needs to be done in order to ensure his life." "What else needs to be done? Please tell me." Hong Zhu's mind was still on how to find the medicinal ingredients, so when she heard the white shadow's words, she casually asked. I have to explain first. A serious illness requires fierce medicine. This kid's injuries are too severe, so the medicinal effect of the medicine that this old man has provided is extremely fierce. The white shadow pointed at Xiao Chen and continued to explain, "If this kid is not injured, then after taking this medicine, he should be able to hold on for a while. However, you also know that his current condition is not optimistic." After listening for a long time, Hong Zhu was still a little confused. He did not know what else needed to be done apart from drinking the medicine, so he could not help but open his mouth to urge, "Hi immortal, please tell me quickly. What exactly do we need to do?" Because he currently only has a sliver of life force left, so the medicinal ingredients that I've listed are the ones with the strongest yang energy and the most vigorous vitality, so. The white shadow paused, a somewhat hesitant expression on her face. Chapter 1451. Hurry up and tell me. Don't keep me in suspense. Hongzhu could not help but stomp his feet anxiously as he inwardly ridiculed, why does this old immortal like to keep others in suspense? Can't he see what time it is? What if he delays treating Xiao Chen's injuries? Seeing that Hongzhu was about to explode in anger, the old man still had an awkward expression on his face and could only helplessly say, "It's not that this old man wants to keep you in suspense, it's just that this old man doesn't know how to deal with this situation." Pointing at the motionless Xiao Chen, the white phantom said, "As you can see, this boy's injuries are too severe. My prescription is filled with yang attribute medicines. If I were to directly use it, he might not be able to endure it and die. Therefore, I need a medicinal catalyst to balance the yin and yang of the medicine, but this old man really can't think of a suitable method at the moment, which is why I'm so conflicted." Medicinal catalyst? Balance yin and yang? Hongzhu blinked in confusion and asked in confusion, "Is there no suitable heavenly treasure that can be added to the prescription to directly neutralize the medicinal properties?" "No, then this medicine will have no effect." The white phantom shook his head decisively and explained, "I originally intended to use the vigorous yang energy to guide him to regain his vitality. If it is directly turned into a neutralizing medicine, then it will be meaningless. Even if he drinks it, there won't be any reaction. Then what should I do?" Hongzhu paced back and forth twice, many medicinal herbs that he had seen and understood before circling around in his mind, but for the time being, he could not think of any suitable medicinal primers that could harmonize the yin and yang of the medicine without losing its medicinal properties. Just as Hongzhu was frowning in thought, the white phantom seemed to sway slightly, the color of its shadow faintly fading. Raising his head to look at the sky, the white phantom did not give Hongzhu any more time to think and quickly said, "Think carefully about the specific method. In any case, this old man has already told you everything, you can choose what you want to do. I estimate that this boy can only last for a few more hours at most, any later and it will be too late. If you have made up your mind, don't waste too much time." As soon as he finished speaking, the white phantom stretched out a hand and tapped Hongzhu's head. Then, his body began to spin rapidly, stirring up the surrounding dried branches and leaves to wrap around his entire body. Hongzhu had just recovered from his shock when he saw a flash of white light. That cluster of leaves suddenly fell to the ground, and the white phantom image disappeared into thin air. "Wait. Immortal, wait a moment, I still don't know where to get the herbs." Ouch. Furthermore, the key point was that he did not know how to get out of the cultivation world, and that old immortal liked to keep him guessing, insisting that he was smart and would be able to think of a way. Wasn't this clearly a trap? Hongzhu anxiously paced back and forth in the cave, his brain quickly turning, racking his brains for a way that he had not thought of before. Right. After pacing back and forth a few times, Hongzhu's thoughts suddenly flashed like a spark, as if he had caught onto some information. Herbs. Heavenly treasures. That's right. Didn't the Burning Sky faction still keep a bag of heavenly treasures from the inner martial world? There must be something in there that I need. Hongzhu fiercely slapped his forehead, remembering that when he had just entered the cultivation world, he had once inexplicably been smashed by a bag full of heavenly treasures planted by the inner martial world. Later on, it had been collected by Xiao Chen and accompanied him all the way to the Burning Sky faction. If the people of the Burning Sky faction had not cleaned up Xiao Chen's room, then this bag of heavenly treasures should still be in his room. If I bring that bag over, I can brew the medicine. But how should I go and get it? Since the problem of the herbs had been solved, Hongzhu next had to consider the fastest way to obtain it. Since Xiao Chen had escaped with serious injuries, then the Burning Sky faction might have already been occupied by Elder Nangong. Hongzhu reckoned that if he rashly returned, it was very likely that he would walk right into a trap and be caught. Moreover, he had absolutely no idea where he was right now, so even if he wanted to sneak back and retrieve it, it would be a problem. Chapter 1452. The hope that had just sprouted was once again mercilessly doused with a bucket of cold water. This caused Hongzhu to feel anxious from the bottom of her heart. She hurriedly paced back and forth beside Xiao Chen, repeatedly thinking of a feasible solution, but her mind remained completely blank. Just as she was beginning to despair, Hongzhu suddenly felt something flash in the corner of her eye. She raised her head in astonishment and discovered that the flash of light had come from outside the cave. Following the light and walking out of the cave, Hongzhu discovered that there was a sword hilt stuck in the ground. She casually pulled out the sword hilt, and shockingly discovered that it was the flying sword that had brought her and Xiao Chen to escape from the Burning Heaven faction and staggered to this place. Looking at the flying sword in her hand, a thought suddenly flashed through Hongzhu's mind. She hesitated for a moment, but still opened her mouth to ask, "Hey, you, flying sword, can you help me steal something from the Burning Heaven faction?" Although she felt that her actions were a little foolish, Hongzhu had already lost her sense of propriety and was not willing to let go of any method. As soon as she finished speaking, the flying sword suddenly left Hongzhu's palm and floated in front of her, as if waiting for further instructions. Hongzhu was stunned for a moment. Then, he described in a probing manner, "That thing is in the room that Xiao Chen and I were staying in. It's a gray bag, and it's filled with natural treasures. Xiao Chen brought it over from the inner martial world. Can you help me steal it back as soon as possible? Xiao Chen's life is completely in your hands. The earlier you return, the more hope we have." Whoosh! As if it understood Hongzhu's words, the flying sword first flew back to the cave and circled around Xiao Chen a few times. Then, with a piercing sound, it turned into a streak of light and shot out of the cave like a bolt of lightning. It seemed to be returning to the Burning Heaven faction to retrieve the medicinal ingredients. Watching as the flying sword instantly turned into a small black dot in the sky, Hongzhu suddenly remembered something. She hurriedly formed the shape of a trumpet with her hands, placed them by her mouth, and loudly yelled, "Hey! Remember to bring back a pot to boil medicine." When the traces of the flying swords completely disappeared, Hongzhu realized that there was now hope of solving the most important problem. His spirits immediately rose and he no longer felt tired. He immediately rolled up his sleeves and began to collect dry wood from the nearby forest. He even found a stone with a depression and filled a nearby stream with some clean water for later use. Although the strange roars of unknown wild beasts could be heard from time to time around the cave, Hongzhu did not have the time to care about that right now. He did not even have the time to feel the slightest bit of fear as he nimbly picked up the wood and returned to the cave with the stone filled with water. After he had finished preparing everything he needed, Hongzhu went to a corner of the cave and found a sharp protruding rock. He dug a hole in the ground and placed the wood in it. In this way, when the flying sword returned with the herbs, he would be able to boil the medicinal soup as soon as possible. After packing up everything, Hongzhu quietly sat down at Xiao Chen's side. He stretched out his hand and gently stroked the latter's slightly cold face, his expression still extremely solemn. When he had been preparing the various herbs, Hongzhu had been trying hard to recall what the old man in his dream had told him about the medicinal primer, but he had not been able to recall it. Hongzhu could only vaguely remember that the white-bearded old man had said that because the medicine was extremely young and fierce, something had to be used to balance the yin and yang of the medicine. Only then would the severely injured Xiao Chen not die from the impact of the medicinal efficacy. However, the medicinal primer could not be used directly in the decoction of the medicine and could only be used on its own, lest the medicine lose its effectiveness. In this short period of time, Hongzhu had already recalled all the medicinal primers that he had seen and not seen, and even those that he had only read about in ancient texts. Most of them did not seem to be very effective, and there were some herbs that seemed to be effective, but there was no way to obtain them in this place and time. What should I do? What kind of medicinal primer can neutralize the medicinal properties, and it just so happens that I can get my hands on it right now. Hongzhu rubbed his hair in distress. Just as he was feeling depressed, he suddenly heard the sound of something breaking through the air. Hongzhu turned his head towards the source of the sound, and saw that the flying sword had just returned from outside the cave. There was a bulging gray bundle hanging on the sword's body, and it was also carrying a small pot which was used to boil medicine. Inside the pot was a medicine bowl. Seeing this scene, Hongzhu immediately threw all his conflicted feelings to the back of his mind. He quickly ran over and carefully removed the cloth bag, pots and bowls from the ground. When he opened the gray bundle, he found that it was indeed filled with heavenly materials and earthly treasures. There were no signs that it had been tampered with. Hongzhu could not help but cheer. Great! Husband Xiaoqin can be saved now. Flying sword, you have done a meritorious deed. And Xiaoma was also a little excited. She controlled the flying sword to swing left and right, circling around the cave several times to express her excitement. Hongzhu carefully examined the bag again and confirmed that there were no problems with the medicinal herbs in the bundle. He then carefully selected the heavenly materials and earthly treasures that he needed and placed them into the pot in order. After that, he picked up the stone bowl and added some water before placing the pot on top of the firewood. Xiaoqin, hold on a little longer, the medicine will be ready soon. Hongzhu murmured to himself as he glanced back at Xiaoqin. He then took out a flint from his bosom and lit the wood under the pot, beginning to patiently decoct the medicine. After waiting for another half an hour or so, a medicinal aroma finally wafted out from the pot and pervaded the narrow cave. Seeing that the medicinal soup was almost done, Hongzhu did not care about how hot it was. He quickly picked up the pot and slowly poured the finished soup into a bowl. Holding the bowl of medicine, Hongzhu walked to Xiaoqin's side and sat down. He stared at the rich medicinal soup in the bowl and began to worry again. But the medicinal catalyst, what is the medicinal catalyst? If Xiaoqin didn't have a medicinal primer, it was very likely that he wouldn't be able to endure the intense yang energy after drinking the medicine. However, if he didn't drink the medicine, it would only take a few hours for Xiaoqin to stop breathing and lose his life forever. Forget it, let's drink the medicine first. What if husband Xiaoqin is strong-willed and has a vigorous life force, allowing him to make it through? Hongzhu was afraid that if he thought for too long, the medicinal soup would turn cold and lose its medicinal effect. He simply clenched his teeth and supported Xiaoqin with his left hand while holding the bowl with his right. He first pried open Xiaoqin's teeth and then fed the medicinal soup to Xiaoqin bit by bit. Fortunately, although Xiaoqin was unconscious, he had not lost the ability to swallow. In just a short while, he had drunk the entire bowl of medicinal soup. Seeing that the bowl of medicine was almost empty, Hongzhu's heart finally relaxed. He hurriedly put the bowl aside and carefully observed Xiaoqin's reaction, hoping that he could successfully make it through this stage without relying on the medicinal catalyst. Chapter 1453. Ugh. Xiaoqin finally moved after drinking the medicine. He wrinkled his eyebrows imperceptibly, and a low moan came from his throat. His originally somewhat cold body temperature gradually rose, and his breathing became much more even. His expression also looked much more spirited than before. Husband Xiaoqin, how do you feel? Hongzhu called out tentatively, only to find that Xiaoqin did not respond at all. However, his body temperature had already exceeded the standard temperature and was still rising. His skin had also begun to turn slightly red, and it felt somewhat hot to the touch. Inadvertently glancing over, Hongzhu saw that a certain part of Xiaoqin's body was actually slowly propping up a small tent, and from the looks of it, it was possible that his pants would explode at any moment. Husband Xiaoqin, can you hear me? Open your eyes and look at me, okay? Seeing Xiaoqin's reaction, Hongzhu's face immediately flushed red. As someone who understood medicine, she knew that this was a natural physiological reaction caused by excessive yang energy. However, she still felt a little embarrassed in her heart, so she could only continue to call out to Xiaoqin in order to divert her attention. But no matter how she called out to him, Xiaoqin still did not move. Besides the reaction of that part of his body, the only other signs of movement were his body temperature, which was growing increasingly hot, and his skin that was so red that it was almost transparent. Seeing this situation, Hongzhu could not help but look anxious. She first touched Xiao Chen's burning hot forehead, and then simply placed both her hands on it, wanting to use her normal body temperature to help him cool down. Phew. As soon as Xiao Chen touched the cool skin on Hongzhu's hands, he seemed to sigh in comfort, and the situation slightly eased. But not long after, Hongzhu's hands also began to heat up, and the heat from Xiao Chen's body had even begun to burn her hands. What should I do? Xiao Chen's husband doesn't seem to be able to hold on for much longer. Hongzhu's eyes darted around anxiously, and suddenly, her gaze landed on the tall, little Xiao Chen, and a bolt of lightning seemed to suddenly flash through her mind. Could it be that she needed to do that thing? Harmony of yin and yang, harmony of yin and yang. Hongzhu repeated these words over and over again, feeling more and more that it might really be as he thought. Men were of the yang attribute, while women were of the yin attribute. Originally, the combination of the two could neutralize the yin and yang, not to mention that she was still a virgin. Wouldn't the medicine that Xiao Chen took be the right medicine? But, when she thought about how she was going to end up like the unconscious Xiao Chen, Hongzhu's beautiful face couldn't help but blush. She tugged at the corner of her clothes with her left hand and bit her lower lip, not knowing what to do. Her mind was a complete mess. Don't be fooled by how Hongzhu often talked about the matters between men and women, as if she was very open. That was all to tease Xiao Chen. She herself was just a little girl without any actual combat experience. If she really had to take the initiative to face it, just imagining the scene would make her feel extremely shy. But apart from this method, there didn't seem to be any other solution. It wasn't that Hongzhu didn't want to join with Xiao Chen, she just felt a little regretful in her heart. After all, this was her first time, while Xiao Chen was still unconscious. Moreover, they were in a simple and crude cave, which didn't seem to be a very good feeling. As her thoughts ran wild, Hongzhu's expression kept changing. One moment she was shy, the next moment she was conflicted, the next moment she was nervous and melancholy. She couldn't even tell what she was really thinking in her heart. Ugh! Just as Hongzhu was feeling extremely distressed, Xiao Chen suddenly moved and let out a low moan that sounded like he was in extreme pain. Hongzhu hurriedly raised her head to look and discovered that Xiao Chen's entire body was very tense. The blood vessels under his skin were clearly visible. Moreover, she could see with her eyes that Xiao Chen's pulse was beating extremely quickly. It was already not the speed that a normal person should have. Seeing this posture, Hongzhu knew that she should no longer hesitate. She let out a long breath and stood up as if she had finally made up her mind. In Hongzhu's opinion, regardless of whether this method would work or not, he had to give it a try first. Xiao Chen had already reached the most critical juncture. If he didn't give it a try, he would die either way. It was better to try it as a last resort. It might even have a miraculous effect. After standing up, Hongzhu did not hesitate at all and immediately began to unbutton her clothes. But she had only unbuttoned a few buttons when she suddenly paused, as if she had thought of something. She suddenly turned her head and shouted to the flying sword that was guarding the side, "That flying sword, you go out for a while. Guard the outside and help us keep an eye on it. Don't let anyone, or any creature come close." When Xiaoma, who was hiding in the flying sword, heard Hongzhu's order, he was a little puzzled for a moment. It had been a night and there was no danger, so why did she suddenly say that she wanted to go out and guard the cave? But now that Xiao Chen was unconscious, and Xiaoma did not dare to speak rashly. Helplessly, he circled around the two of them a few times before flying out of the cave resentfully. After confirming that the flying sword had left the cave and could no longer see her and Xiao Chen's situation, Hongzhu began to undress with a peace of mind. In fact, Hongzhu had lied just now. She was not worried that someone or an animal would suddenly come over to cause trouble in broad daylight. She just vaguely felt that this flying sword seemed to be more human-like and had already developed spiritual intelligence. If she and Xiao Chen were to... At that time, this fellow would be watching from the side. Hongzhu felt that something was a little strange, so she deliberately found an excuse to send it away in advance. In just a short while, Xiao Chen's body had become hotter and hotter. His face was red and beginning to turn purple. His forehead was dripping with sweat and his brows were tightly furrowed, looking like he was in great pain. Hongzhu did not dare to delay any longer. She first took off her own clothes, and then took off all the clothes on Xiao Chen's body. Looking at the naked and motionless Xiao Chen in front of him, Hongzhu moved her eyes to a certain place with difficulty. After staring blankly for a while, her mind instantly went blank and she did not know what to do. Ugh! Xiao Chen suddenly trembled slightly and let out a suppressed groan. The veins on his neck popped out, as if he was enduring great pain. Only then did Hongzhu come to his senses. He knew that there wasn't much time left, and he couldn't allow himself to think any further. He could only try his best to recall those Japanese action movies he had secretly watched in the past. Referencing the methods in those movies, he climbed onto Xiao Chen's body and slowly sat down. Ouch, it hurts, damn it, Hongzhu's coquettish voice faintly came from the cave. It sounded like it would cause one's imagination to run wild, but it was impossible to figure out the real situation. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.